Up next is a conversation with Vasilina Valchanova, who is the best person that I know to talk to about brand messaging and positioning. In her career, she's worked with companies of all sizes and solved problems of all sorts, from unclear value proposition to targeting multiple audiences with more complex offerings. I left this conversation with many pointers that I'm ready to apply to my business right away. And I hope you learn from it too. So please enjoy, and I will see you on the other side. So, how about we start with something that's been on my mind lately? And actually, I struggle with that myself. Okay.
Mhm.
And that is personal brand versus business brand, especially on LinkedIn. But I bet it goes beyond that. What's the difference, and which one should you pick, and where to focus?
Yeah, well, I think that very much depends on what's the type of company you're in or you have as a founder. I'm currently very much stretched between corporate branding and personal branding. I
Mm,
have projects working on both, and I have to say that there are a lot of places where they meet up and intermingle. I'd say if you're building a company that's, let's say, B2C brand or something that's very much product based, like you're building a platform, whatever it is, you need to still work on building up that brand because that's where sort of trust happens for your customers because you can't really just say, hey, we're this team of a, B, and C, just building this up as we go along. You need to have even like the simplest thing of it. How do they call you?
yeah.
Where do they go to see your brand promise and so on? Um, but then again, there are situations where a personal brand might be the leading element when it comes to marketing. So, a classic example of that, I work a lot with B2B service providers and small agencies and consulting firms and so on.
Mm,
And in these cases, it's almost always more of a personal brand first type of thing. Because although we have, let's say, the name of the consulting agency or the web studio or whatever it is, you are still, as a user, as a client, very much working with people individually. And you need to make sure that these people are people who can be trusted, people who know
mm-hmm.
their stuff, even just like the very basic stuff of like people who are fun to be around with. I mean, we don't
Basically,
want to work with
yeah,
people we don't necessarily, click with.
true.
So in this case, it's very common to sort of do marketing mainly through the personal brands of the team, the individual contributors, the owners of the company, and so on and so forth. And then the final situation that's quite common, where a personal brand might be the leading figure, would be in early stage startups where you're as it has become very much in vogue, you're building in public and you're trying as a founder to show the growth trajectory of your company and how you're achieving what you're achieving in terms of numbers, in terms of traction, and so on and so forth. In this situation, the two, your company or product brand and your founder brand, will sort of be going hand in hand,
Mhm.
and there will be this interaction between the two where they'll be strengthening each other. And there's really cool examples of that. I can plug in local Bulgarian company that has a pretty big impact. They're called Team GPT,
Mhm.
and they're building sort of a workspace environment where teams can collaborate and get better at using AI for, frankly, whatever purposes they're using it for. And the founder of the company has been very active at presenting what they're doing and how they're doing what they're doing. And this has been very instrumental in the growth of the company itself as well. And
Mhm.
at the same time, the marketing that they're doing for the company is very founder led. So they're putting front and center the people on the team. And in that way, they're also strengthening their personal brand. So there's this sort of
Mm.
mix and match between the two, this interaction that's very interesting.
That actually puts me at ease. Because I needed that reassurance that I'm doing the right thing. As a founder of a company, I definitely try to put myself out there rather than business. However, there are times that I watch recordings, for example, in Clarity or Hotjar,
Mhm.
where people land on our website through my LinkedIn profile. They browse around, but then they scroll down to the footer and they click LinkedIn to see what's up on the company page on LinkedIn. Right? So we have this weird
Yeah.
mix where people need to trust me first before they even entertain the idea of working with Nerd
Mhm.
Cow. But when they get to the point of, okay, that's interesting, they want to explore Nerd Cow a bit more. And if we actually post anything whatsoever on LinkedIn, whether any, I don't know, rewards, case studies, events, like nothing, it's anything at all. So it's like an interesting dynamic there.
Yeah.
And I actually, two examples that come to mind. One is McDonald's on X. If you visit McDonald's on X, they are farming it. It's crazy. It's so good. They're always funny, but they clearly, I mean, they're a B2C brand. Like they're truly funny, very meme orientated. So they're doing well. But then on LinkedIn you have HubSpot, and their posts are fantastic, and people engage with them so much. But this one is B2B though, so I guess there is a place for a brand
Yeah.
to exist in that space too. But as you said, early stage startups or companies that are based on trust building, they need those personas, those people, those faces behind the brand to lead the
Yeah.
way. Is that what you said essentially? Is that?
Yeah, yeah, pretty much 100%. And actually, that idea of trust is key, I think,
Mm-hmm,
because I don't want to leave that impression that it's just about small early stage companies where personal brand is important. Actually, a counter example to that, I've been working with a very large enterprise level company that's in a very very sophisticated, very complex market. They're into the EV industry, but
mm.
NDAs, so I
Yeah.
can't share a lot
Yeah.
more other than that. But essentially what we found out is that when we start working on strengthening the connection with the salespeople, the people who are there at the front line, who are talking to the decision makers in the companies, this is where magic happens, because even though the platform that they're providing is a very sophisticated, it's, and I am biased, but I think it's miles ahead over other competitors that are out there
Mm-hmm,
feature wise. The thing that we found out was key to their customers was the fact that their salespeople weren't really selling in the traditional sense. They were actually very much a consultant to the business who would tell you in a very direct, very transparent manner what would be a good fit for you or not, even in the case where
mm,
this might mean to disqualify a potential customer because they are just not a good fit for the platform. So in this case, we saw that although we are very much focusing on building the product brand,
mm-hmm.
the decision making process goes through that personal connection, which is sort of the basis of a personal brand as well.
It just highlights how multi-layered all of that is, and
Yeah.
I hope to break this down a bit more with you today. And I think the next point I really wanted to follow up with is there's the concept of a brand, there's concept of positioning or messaging, uh can you even tell me where to start? Like what came first?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And I actually saw recently a very good sort of visual representation of this, which was sort of the idea of the iceberg.
Hmm.
So, you know how, I mean, we've all seen images like that. You know how the iceberg, like the majority of it is actually underwater. So
Hmm.
that's not something that's customer facing, if you will. That's not something that we see, but it's there to support the actual tip of it.
Hmm.
So what we can think about is in that bottom part, the part that's underwater. What we have there and where we need to start is the brand itself. You can call it brand promise. You can call it value proposition. You can call it USP. You know, there are a lot
Hmm.
of intermingling concepts in there, but essentially what I'm talking about is like the essence of your brand. What are you building? Why are you building it? And why a person should care at a very like fundamental level. Um, then what comes next? is the positioning, which is more of the let's call it the strategic representation of that brand promise. Because you can know on a deep level what you're trying to achieve with your company. But then when you actually have to communicate that to the outside world, you need to be aware of different forces that come into play, which means, do you know who are the other players in the market? What are the other solutions that people are actually considering when they have this issue at hand and they need to decide between you and somebody else? In a lot of cases, when doing positioning exercises, we actually find out that the competitors that we are thinking about, because we're so steeped into the market, are not at all the type of solutions that our customers are trying out. And it may be that, a solution that's a competitor to you can actually be, cobbling up an Excel spreadsheet to do that work
Hmm.
rather than, another sophisticated SaaS platform,
Yeah.
as you might think. So positioning looks into the market, the different competitors out there, the different customer segments that will be a good fit with the solution that you're trying to build, because you can't build for everyone. So you need to know, who do you want to attract, what do they consider a good solution, and how do you differentiate against these different solutions within that specific customer segment. So that's the level of positioning. Sort of, if you think
Mm.
about it as if you think about the market as a chessboard, where do you put your piece, essentially? Then what comes on top of that is the messaging part, which is more, now we start to get a bit more tactical, in the sense that messaging sort of describes what do you want to say to represent that positioning to others. I'm putting a very strong focus on the word what here,
Hmm.
because we're really talking about what are the themes that we want to present, what are the promises that we want to make, what are the different things that we want to talk about. And this can include specific features that you have, or company capabilities, or even your business model and your pricing model. Maybe they are that differentiator that's going to put you on the map for this type
Hmm.
of customer that you're trying to target. So this is the level where we're talking about, okay, what are the different themes that we want to cover? And then only after that, we go into copywriting, which is the tip of the iceberg that's visible above water, which is what your customers are seeing. And here we want to know, how do we actually explain these things that we have defined in our messaging in a way that resonates with the customer? And this is where, all the creative treatment of
Hmm.
that messaging can come to play. This is where you figure out what's the campaign that imbues that messaging with, in a format that's engaging, and so on. This is where you figure out what are the words on the homepage, and so on and so forth. So this is sort of how I think about it across these four individual levels.
I feel like, so copywriting or content is where it all comes together, and website is the child of everything that precedes it. So
Yeah.
if I understand it correctly, you start with brand, and that essentially you mean you try to decide on who you are,
Hmm.
and then positioning is like a strategy on how you sell yourself, how you sell the brand, and then messaging is what we actually sell, like we communicate what we sell. Is that right?
Yeah, it's pretty much it. I wouldn't necessarily use the word sell, because it may be more. It can be broader than that. It can be about. It can be even about what are the next type of features that we want to build, or how do we communicate about it. And there's this, when I say how do we communicate about it, there's this very common situation where I'd come in a new client call, and they'll say, oh, we've been thinking for 20 weeks straight, should we call this a product or a
Yeah.
platform?
Oh,
you
I
know
heard that before. Absolutely.
yeah, that's not what I'm talking about at all.
Okay.
I'm talking about the things that your customer is actually gonna care
Yeah.
about, because
Okay.
they
Okay.
don't really care if it's called a product or a platform. And the easiest way, frankly, and I think we're gonna dive into that
Mm-hmm.
further down in the conversation because this is a big part of positioning and messaging. The easiest way to solve that 20-week discussion that's been going on is to just go to 5 of your customers and ask them, like, if you were
Oh,
describing us
mm.
to a peer, to a colleague, to a friend who might benefit from using us, what would you say? How would you describe this? And then you have your answer from that center.
I'm so glad you mentioned just customer feedback. I feel like we too often forget about it. And this question, how would you describe the company, the product to your friend, is probably my favorite to ask every time
Yeah.
I facilitate a user test. It's awesome. So starting at the top, what would you say are the key challenges in building a brand? If that's where it all begins, what we need to be aware of?
Well, I I have extensive experience working with clients and working as an integral part of marketing teams, but I'd want to sort of base this on a larger sample size.
Mm-hmm.
And you may have come across these studies that show what are the most common reasons for a startup to fail. And one of the biggest ones is that there simply wasn't a market need for that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that there are a few different things all jumbled together in that quote unquote reason. One part is we didn't do the research and we're just building something that's completely out of whack with what the market needs. I mean, like, I may build the most awesome banana shaped running sneakers, but if no one wants to run in banana shaped shoes, then
Mm-hmm.
like
Yeah.
that's dead in the water. um and that's, I think that by now, every accelerator that you see, every venture builder, they're gonna talk to you about, like, you need to sort of measure traction, and you need to find product market fit, and you need to make sure that what you're building actually fits the market. So this is one scenario that I think that nowadays isn't such a major issue. The two other that are, I think, more interesting are, one of them is you're building something, but you haven't really nailed down the target audience that you need to approach with it in order to succeed. This might mean that you're trying to target too wide of a market and it's hard to penetrate in it just because, like, there are so many different customers in there with so many different micro segments with different needs, and you're sort of even when looking at customer feedback, it's very, very muddy and very difficult to follow because you're getting so many different feature requests or improvement requests from people who have uh, essentially different use case scenarios. So narrowing that down, figuring out what's the subsegment that I'm trying to target is
Mm-hmm.
very important. And then this is also where positioning comes into play, because these different subsegments, they're going to have different needs, and maybe your solution is the perfect fit for a subsegment, but if you describe it in a way that would fit a broader part of the market, that benefit that you can actually provide that subsegment, it just doesn't come through. There's a very, very popular example that comes to mind, April Dunford, and she's the goat of positioning.
We all
Her
know,
goal,
yes.
obviously awesome, is just obviously awesome.
Yes.
And she talks about this scenario where they were building, I think it was like a CRM system,
Mm-hmm.
and they quickly found out, well, not quickly, but through trial and error and very difficult conversation, they
Mm-hmm.
found out that they were a great fit. They had this one feature which was very beneficial to investment bankers. But if you just promoted it as we're an amazing CRM, you're going to get immediately compared to something like a HubSpot or a Salesforce. And that intrinsic benefit that you can give a very specific subsegment doesn't shine through.
Mm-hmm.
But when you go to this through this positioning scenario and you're like, what's the ideal subsegment? What's the right fit for us at the moment? And you figure out, oh, it's investment bankers, then we're going to promote it as the keeping track of relationships for investment bankers, and this is what the benefit is. And so to wrap this
Mhm.
long-winded answer that I just gave you, I think it's not so much about is there true value in your product, but rather is the value that you have a good fit for the customer you're trying to reach, and are you communicating that fit in the right way, which is where positioning and messaging actually come into play.
Okay. And have you got a process that you could share how to arrive at that point?
So, positioning wise, I think again, April Dunford's process is sort of a great fit for that, and we
Okay.
can sort of link in the show comments a sort of overview of that
Yeah,
process that
yeah.
I've written in the past on my blog. But essentially, the way that it goes is if you look at the all of the different competitors that are out there,
Mhm.
and then you list your features, and it can be like just a laundry list of different, again, when I'm saying features here, it's sort of shorthand for the actual product features, but also for business capabilities, the different business model elements that you have into play. And when you list those and you try to connect them into what's the value that they can actually bring to that customer, then what becomes immediately apparent is that this value is going to be important or not important for different types of customers.
Mhm.
So what you want to figure out is, out of all of these different features or attributes that we have, what's the value that they bring, and who's actually going to care about this value the most. And then you have your target segment. And once it sort of
Mm.
goes into a bit of a circle, because once you have that target segment, you're like, okay, so who will those guys pit us against? What are the different solutions that they're trying to that they might look into when they're looking for a solution, and how do we compare against them, and how can we make uh, our product, our solution, the benefit of it, how can it be immediately apparent for these people.
Mhm.
So that's sort of the true level of positioning is what do we say we are, and how do we make sure that they know we're better.
Okay. No, I get it. And I think one thing that you maybe correct me on, but in B2B, the way I feel like when you position yourself, or maybe you could actually help me with that. I don't want to make a statement that's not true. Uh, when you position yourself as a B2B brand, who do you talk to? Because there are humans behind the company, like a team of humans, right?
Yeah.
And do you search for that one champion that you can relate with, or do you speak to a wider audience on the prospect side? How do you work with that?
Well, ideally, you need a bigger sort of set of people to talk to from what we call like a decision making unit. All the different people who are involved in this decision, meaning the champion is one category, the actual economic buyer who's gonna sign off on, yeah, we're fine with giving this amount of money for these specific
Hmm.
terms. The users, because frankly, nowadays, most companies are making sure that they have bottom up approval for top down decisions. So they're going to include a subset of the users who will be using this, let's say, platform or whatever, to actually involve them before they actually make the final
Yeah,
decision to
yeah,
implement something.
sure.
And there may be a lot of other people involved. Like a very classic element to that would be the IT department, who's going to be in charge of doing the integration with whatever you're selling to their current tech stack, and making sure that you're in their good graces. Because if they don't do a quick job, you're dead in the water. You're going to sign a contract that you have the integration set up and running in 30 days, but if they're not happy
Yeah.
with how you build that, and they might slow you down along the way. um, but I think that to simplify this, I think you can tackle these different people in different stages of when you're doing that initial research. So if you're just starting out and you don't have existing customers to talk to, you don't have people that you can easily reach, and you can spend more time with that whole buying unit and
Hmm.
all its different representatives, you can just look for the standard persona of the champion, because that's who you need to attract to get your foot in the door. And then once you have a clear understanding on how to approach the champion, and you make sure that they are fine with what you're building, they're happy to promote you internally, this is when you might see what the next steps are and where you're falling short. Because within that discussion, if you're in good graces of the champion, they will come back to you with feedback, and they'll say, hey, like, I really want to push you guys, but this is what this particular person is telling me that they're not happy with, or they don't entirely understand. And this is a great way to source internal feedback from a person who's already sort of in a trust relationship with you, so to say. So after that, you may see, hey, like, we can easily attract the champions that we need, but when we hit the economic buyer, we're having issues there. So maybe you need to create some sales enablement material that goes specifically to CFOs or whoever's making that decision, to
Hmm.
tell them, hey, like, this is what you need to know, and here's why we're a good solution from the standpoint of finances alone. And so you get that feedback loop almost for free if you're able to attract the champion. So start in one place, and
Hmm.
then go over to all the other
Yeah.
personas.
So I feel like it's all about iterating. You just start somewhere. You get over that
Yeah.
writer's block, and then you keep pushing until you learn more and more. That makes total sense, and I can relate to that rejection too many times. That's
Yeah.
just, yeah, the way it is, unfortunately. Um, so if I understand you correctly, when we do positioning, brand messaging, we have to account for different stakeholders because they have different powers, right? One has buying power, the other one has just veto power, like the IT department.
Yeah.
They can just veto your solution without any regard for what's going on the business level, because the integration just won't work, or it's just gonna take too long. Um, let's maybe flip it. I know you just a few minutes ago you mentioned you worked with an enterprise customer. How do you approach brand positioning? Brand messaging positioning with enterprises that have multiple audiences to talk to and also
Mm.
complicated product offerings? I've been in too many workshops with companies that have exactly that, and it's just amazing. The level of misalignment between stakeholders in those workshop rooms is just through the roof. It's crazy. Like, they all have their own agendas. They all want something else. Expectations are very different. How do you align that? How do you make step forward in the one direction?
So I think it's sort of helpful to think about positioning and messaging as their own separate entities with different sort of reach within that
Okay.
scenario. In the simplest terms, and there are some exceptions to the rule and so on, but let's look at the simplified version. In the simplest terms, positioning is going to speak to your ICP as a whole, so to that company, because
Mm-hmm.
end of the day, you're promising the company as a whole some type of result, and the company as a whole is going to make that decision to work with you rather than someone else.
Mm-hmm.
So you that positioning sort of, it has into it built it has built into it all of the different concerns, or not all of them, but the major
Mm-hmm.
ones that might stop you from becoming that sought after solution. And then when we go to the messaging level, we sort of try to untangle that positioning into different, what I call, key value pillars. and they may speak to different types of personas within that ICP. So the different people within that decision making unit. What I mean by a key value pillar, that's sort of all the different features, capabilities, any other elements that you want to include in there that as a whole are providing some type of value to that customer, some type of tangible value.
Mm.
What I mean by that, I can sort of give you an example.
Mm-hmm.
If you think about something, let's take a simple example like a photo camera. Then you have the size of the sensor, which is what we often hear about cameras, like this is an X megapixel
Mm-hmm.
camera, or I think we're now going into the gigapixel
Oh
space
yeah,
and so
yeah,
on.
yeah. Triple digits. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Then you have the type of lens that you are going to be using and what that provides for you. So, example, the aperture that it can go down to, so you can shoot in low light conditions, or anything else like the camera stabilization. All of these different features as a whole, they're providing the value of taking sharper pictures for you.
Mm-hmm.
This is what, as a
Basically,
user, you care about.
yeah.
You want to have a sharp in focus image. And there are a lot of different features. So when I'm talking about the key value pillar, we're talking about taking sharper pictures.
Mm-hmm.
And within that key value pillar, you have all of these different features. You have all of the different proof points that you can give to not sound too wishy-washy and actually tell the person, hey, when I'm promising you sharper pictures, here's an example of what that looks like. Here's how many expert photographers are already using us to, and they are saying that they're very happy with the sharpness.
Mm-hmm.
Here's like this and that type of proof that we're actually, we can actually achieve what we promise you to do. And you would generally have anywhere between 3 to 5 key value pillars for a fairly simple product, all the way to 7 or 10 for a complex product. And that's sort of top of that scale, having 10 value pillars. I
Yeah.
wouldn't necessarily recommend that to be
Mm-hmm.
your first go-to. Definitely try to lower that number, but you will have more. And essentially, when you have these different value pillars, you can think about them as sort of Lego blocks. So the value of having that messaging framework is that when you have these different key value pillars, you approach a person on the decision making unit and you immediately know how to connect that persona to specific key value pillars that you have. So if you imagine them as two lists,
Mm-hmm.
you have, let's say, the financial decision maker, and these are the 3 value pillars that you need to tell them. You have the actual user, and these are different value pillars that you need to tell them. So to one person you're going to talk about like the ease of use of the product and how much time it saves. To the other person you're going to talk about like guarantees, payment terms, escrow, whatever financial terms make sense in your different
Yeah.
scenario. So this is how you go from the position, which is the unified story that you tell company to company, brand to brand, and then you sort of split this into different messaging elements that you can use to do that conversation with the individual people on the buying team.
When you describe it all, it makes so much sense. It's just crazy.
So
Thank
happy
you
to
so
hear
much
it.
for this. Super interesting. And when you were explaining this, I could see a sitemap building in my head. You start with homepage, and you never know who's going to land on your homepage. It's one of the stakeholders for sure, and then you lead them to a value proposition with subpages that's more relevant to them, and you push them down that avenue until they actually buy into the idea. So that's awesome. Thank you so much. That was brilliant. And it I can't shed the feeling that it has this undertone of simplifying as much as possible. Just keep it simple, to the point, right? And speaking of simplicity in messaging, I know you are promoting science events, right?
Yeah, they
Yeah,
are.
awesome. Which I believe can be tricky to explain due to their nature, right?
Yeah.
I mean, come on. So could you maybe speak a bit just to balancing simplicity with depth in messaging?
Yeah, that's actually a great connection, and it's really why we started this. So, to everyone listening, this is a Bulgarian organization. We're only working locally, so I'm not here to plug anything. But essentially, 12 years ago, a friend of mine and me, we started an NGO that focuses on science communication and promoting science through popular science events.
Hmm.
So we're trying to make science sexy again. Is the word we can think about it.
I like that.
And throughout our work, we've had to work with great experts, great science experts who know a lot of stuff about their particular scientific field, but who are sort of struggling to talk to an audience of laymen like me and you,
Hmm.
or
Hmm.
at least me. I don't know, I don't
No,
know
no,
how deep
fair
you go
assessment.
to the
Fair
science.
assessment. It's okay.
So, what our role has been throughout this sort of improbable journey is to help these scientists really bring what they know to the type of language that's accessible to someone without their background and without an academic degree,
Hmm.
and making sure that it's first off easy to understand, but then also true to what really lies below. So a big thing is that with a lot of popular science, you're running the risk of simplifying by dumbing it down, and in dumbing it down you're
Hmm.
actually making untrue claims. You know um, that's my favorite example is you've seen bajillion news articles that are saying that this or that thing causes cancer or doesn't cause
Oh yeah,
cancer,
yeah.
and this is dumbing it down to the point where the information isn't true anymore because there are a lot of caveats
Hmm.
behind this.
Hmm.
And then when you actually try to explain what goes into a piece of research, how do we actually define if something may cause cancer or not, and what are the different levels of certainty that we have, you're explaining it in simple terms without making untrue claims. So this is from this point of view of science. If
Hmm.
we're bringing this to marketing and messaging, I think the greatest problem, the greatest risk that we're running is dumbing it down to a point where we're over promising and we're stating that something is a miracle cure, a silver bullet.
Hmm.
And this is where we're running the risk of completely shattering the trust that we've managed to build up to this point. Because if we want to tell a person that our product is, has these and these characteristics, um, we need to be sure that we can actually deliver on that promise to make
Hmm.
sure that we're not, through that messaging, we might attract a new customer, but they are not going to stay with us in the long run. So that's a bad customer to acquire if you're overpromising, because they'll come into the product with different expectations. They won't be happy with it. They are first going to incur costs to your team just by virtue of requesting features that are just not on your roadmap because you're building for a different persona. They're going to lose the time of your customer support team because they're going to come back and request different things and not be completely clear on what they need to do to achieve this result. In the long run, they may badmouth you in front of others because you just didn't do the job you promised. So, this is a scenario where by trying to make things simpler, you go into these bombastic statements and they are achieving a bad result for you. Long term, you're actually losing out of that good messaging that you've developed, which is attracting more people. Um, I actually have an example of this in a completely different space, not in tech at all.
Okay.
There's this very popular brand of slimming tea, which you supposedly take, and then they promise that in a few days you're gonna, shed like 4 kilos or something like that.
Oof. Where is
And
it?
First off, that's a completely bogus health claim, so it's problematic on a lot of different levels.
Mm-hmm.
But then also, from the conversations I've been hearing online about them, people are just like actively mad at this company for over promising, and this is the main issue that they're seeing. Like they can never in a million years pull that claim through and actually
Yeah.
deliver on these results.
Yeah.
And we get um, angry pretty quickly on the internet nowadays, but to actually take the time and enter into a discussion with other people about the brand you've never actually tried and then you've just seen their ads, that takes a lot of dedication. So it shows that your messaging is definitely resonating with people, just not on the frequency that you want it to resonate.
Yeah, yeah, it just flies over their head. How do you? Okay, so but you said that the one of the risks is when you overpromise, right? And that
Yeah.
just creates bad expectations. Um, would you agree that the other risk is sounding just too vague? Like, isn't there like a balance that you need to strike?
Yeah, definitely, and that's actually a very good point. And thanks for bringing that back because I might have missed it if we're going to the next question. But um, there's one common scenario where when you're just starting out, you're looking at the leaders in your industry, and
Oh,
you're trying to sort of fashion your messaging based on what you see on, let's say, their homepage or
mm-hmm,
something like that.
mm-hmm,
And the issue that comes into play here is that you're looking at someone who's so far ahead in their journey compared to where you're at that uh, their strategy and their approach to messaging doesn't make any sense to you at this moment. A great example of that, I think it's Anthony Pieri, who's an amazing messaging expert. They have a company called Fletch PMM. So to anyone listening who's interested in messaging, this is a great source
mm-hmm.
for learning more about
Yeah, I
messaging.
second that. Yep.
Yeah. So he always bashes companies like Slack and HubSpot for their messaging
He
because
does.
it's extra vague. I actually, as we're talking, I opened up Slack's homepage to see what their current version of that messaging is,
Mm-hmm.
and their homepage says where work happens. I mean,
Ouch.
how vague can you get, right? But
Yes.
the thing is that they don't need clear messaging and they don't need more specific messaging because they're banking on the fact that they're nowadays a super recognizable company and they're playing a completely different ball game than someone who's just starting out in
Mm-hmm.
that space. So um, we see a lot of these very aspirational, very identity focused, taglines and slogans, and we think this is what messaging needs to look like. We need to be creative. We need to be the Nikes and the Apples and the Slacks and the HubSpots. But in fact, if you're just starting out, you need to be very clear on what you're trying to do, who you're for, and what you're gonna do for them. And
Yeah.
yeah, this is sort of one of the biggest issues with copycat type of messaging, that you're gonna run into something that's just not a good fit for you, even from the standpoint of product life cycle.
100%, and I'm so glad you brought that up. Thank you. Oh, I'm loving it. Absolutely. Just have you seen on LinkedIn very lately? There's been an exercise. People have been trying to rewrite HubSpot's homepage. Have you seen this? Maybe.
I haven't. No, it
No, there was
hasn't
like a
crossed my mind.
contest someone organized to rewrite HubSpot's homepage because it was so bad. And actually, when you compare HubSpot's homepage and Salesforce homepage, they are the same. One says, I think HubSpot offers to help you grow faster, or no, sorry, HubSpot helps you to grow better, whatever it means. I don't know, just better, okay? And Salesforce helps you to grow faster, so you choose your
Mhm.
medicine. Well, I don't know,
Yeah.
by whatever they mean. But I think it's also that vagueness becomes a problem the larger you become, because you have to start talking to people who are misaligned in their values and needs, right? And so
Great.
you can't be too specific without isolating the other group, and that's why
Yeah.
they probably stay on that high sort of ambiguous level of messaging, which is
Mhm.
not a good recipe for early startups. Actually, most companies. Let's say that. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah,
How do
definitely.
you feel about jargon in the copy? I remember just a quick preface on our homepage. We're a web design agency, so naturally we talk to marketers, and our heading at some point said, um, "Tofu, mofu, bofu." We get it. And that was one of the headings somewhere in the on the homepage. And I mean, no, like you put an engineer in front of that homepage, that heading will fly over their head. No idea.
Yeah.
But marketer just clicks immediately.
Yeah.
So that is type of a jargon. How do you feel about using jargon in the copy?
I think that there's good and bad jargon. There's jargon that you use in order to just sound smarter, long words and so
Mm.
on. Like if I see operationalize one more time, I
Oh.
swear I'm gonna scream. So
Okay.
you have that version of like
Yeah.
multi-syllable words which sound very very businessy. And this just looks like like a kid who put on the work suit of their father and
Mm-hmm.
is strolling around the apartment,
Yep.
something like that.
Yep.
So that doesn't really work. There's also jargon that's in this bad category. There's jargon that's just gonna that it just represents the what they call the curse of knowledge. This is the situation where you haven't really done the work to simplify the messaging and make it accessible to your audience. So if you're a web design agency and you're talking to me, a marketer, in web design terms, and you're telling me about first coats of paint, whatever,
Yep. Yep.
you know it's just like whew,
So yep.
doesn't work at all.
Missed it.
And then I'm not gonna it's like we're speaking different languages. So this is the scenario where you're just so deep into your work that you don't really stop and think, will the people that I'm trying to approach actually understand what I'm trying to say? It's like being at a family gathering and talking to your grandma about web design. What terms would you use? Like go more in that direction rather than the very very techie terms.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's also good jargon, which essentially shows that we're part of the same tribe. The best example I can give, back in my e-commerce days, I was a brand manager for a gaming brand called Razer.
I
And
know it very well. Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So what we were doing, like everything we were doing, all the content that we were writing, or the social media posts, all the events we were organizing, we were trying to show people, hey, we get you. And I had to actually work very hard to understand that if you write down the number 1337
Yeah.
in
Lead.
game
Yep.
speak, it actually
Yep.
means lead, and
Yep.
that's like cool. So I
Absolutely.
I had to essentially learn a new language
Mm-hmm.
to fit with that crowd. And I actually saw something today, in a sort of unrelated category. Reddit are currently trying to help marketers not suck at Reddit marketing. So they have built an AI copywriting assistant that can look at your ad and try to make it sound more suitable for the Reddit audience. And they ran tests and they saw that ads with what they call Redditisms, um, they perform 70% better in terms of CPA, C and CPL compared to ads that are just like plain like
Mm-hmm.
regular. So in that situation, showing that you're part of the in crowd can be very powerful, and you don't need to, remove that jargon just because it's jargon. It's actually it's like a secret handshake with your audience.
Nice.
And
I like
that's
that.
and that's actually super cool when you see it in real life and it works nice.
So to any marketers thinking on advertising on Reddit, I highly recommend just browsing a few communities and just learning their language. I'm a huge Redditor. I'm on that platform a lot because I play a lot of games, and it's like a natural corner of the internet where gamers
Yeah.
hang out. Uh, it's a different way of being, and I am not surprised that they developed the tool that help you immerse yourself in that world, because
Yeah.
the chasm between like LinkedIn and Reddit, it's oh my, it's huge. So I mean, hats off for you to learning the Reddit way. It really, it's
Yeah.
crazy. It's crazy. I wanted to ask you about a framework. One framework in particular, which I think you're a fan of, and that's something we also spoke about in the previous podcast episode with Ibrahim. That is jobs to be done, right?
Yeah.
Uh, can you tell me in your own words what it does, what it is, and how does it influence your approach to work?
Okay, you have to stop me at one point because when
Uh
I
oh.
start talking about
Uh
jobs to be
oh.
done, I tend to go forever and ever. So I'll do my best to self-edit,
Okay.
but just to
Okay.
be clear.
Okay. Okay. Shoot.
Um, Jobs to be done is really about understanding your customer on a deeper than the superficial feature focus slash practical level, and figuring out what's really driving their buying decision or any other type of user behavior, really, because we've used jobs to be done both for the purposes of customer acquisition, but also for improving retention and figuring out how to improve a feature and so on. So in the simplest terms, jobs to be done looks beyond the actual things that the person is doing into what they're trying to achieve in the long run.
Mm.
And I I love one example, which is if you're selling lawnmowers for people to mow their lawn, if they have like a country house or a house in the city. You might be tempted to sort of look at your product and be like, okay, so what are the features of like Husqvarna and all the big brands out there? How are we better? And what can we do to present our product in a better light? But what you may be forgetting is that there are a lot of different competitors that you're not even addressing in this case. And I think that this is when looking at competition is very clearly to see how jobs to be done goes beyond, but that's not the only situation where it does. So if you're looking at the standard approach, you're like, okay, we have this lawnmower, there are other lawnmowers on
Hmm.
the market, how are we better, what features are better? Maybe it's price, maybe it's that it doesn't require as much fuel, or that it's lighter so the woman
Hmm.
of the house can also use it, and we can make a pink version and it's gonna be brilliant. um, what we're not paying attention to though is that the person isn't, like, you don't wake up in the morning and you're not like, oh, I can't wait to mow the lawn. This is actually a tedious task, but it helps you achieve something more. You have a well kept home, you have a well kept lawn. Maybe you're more you're happier because your kids have somewhere nice to play at, or maybe you're happier because you're showing to all the neighbors that you're the best neighbor in the
Yeah.
area and your house just looks way better than theirs.
Mm.
So in this situation, you can already think about, okay, how are we a better solution than hiring the neighbor's kid to do that job for $10 on the weekend? Or how are we better than hiring a professional landscaper? Because these are all in the mind of the customer, these are the types of solutions that they can also use to achieve that
Mm.
same effect, to have a well kept lawn. And then you can go even a step further and you can really think about the motivation and the personal progress that the person is making. So if for me it's important to be the best neighbor in the neighborhood, then one way to do that would be to have a well kept lawn. But another way would be to have the best Halloween or Christmas decorations. So now you see that what you're trying to achieve in the end is much different than what you started off with. And that impacts who you think of as a competitor. It impacts how you think of the messaging that you want to create, of course.
Mhm.
It may change the way you promote your product or the different partners that you work with, and it can have a lot of different implications. But it all starts with really understanding what's driving me as a user to actually uh, do some significant change in my life and choose a solution like yours.
Okay. So what I'm hearing from you is that jobs to be done framework puts focus on the user rather than the solutions that already exist on the market. It changes the mindset, how you approach thinking about your own product. What's the point of reference? You changing point of reference. Is that right?
It is, and I think the other big element to it is that it goes beyond the task at hand to look at the deeper motivation of that
Mm-hmm.
customer.
Okay.
Because it also means that with different motivation, me and you, we can be completing the same type of task,
Mm-hmm.
but we choose a different solution just because the motivation is different. I'm pretty sure that we have a different favorite brand of backpacks,
Oh yeah.
because one thing will be important to you in the backpack
Mm-hmm.
and a different thing will be important to me.
Mm-hmm.
So that motivation element to it changes your choice as a customer. And as a marketer, you need to be aware of that to really figure out how to approach different customers.
I love that, and I always appreciate when the conclusion is that the user first approach is the best approach. As a customer myself, like we are all customers to Amazon or to Dropbox or whatever company you use. Uh, you can appreciate when they think of you as an individual rather than of
Yeah.
just another stranger. That's very very thoughtful of them, and I think it works to their benefit to actually tailor their copy, messaging, positioning to attract people like me that will like them, that will align their expectations with what the product can provide. That
Mhm.
works to it's win win win. Is honestly across the board. So
Mhm.
that's awesome. Have you? And I don't mind to put you on a spot here, but if you can think of anything, are there any other frameworks that come to mind that might be helpful to people when thinking about positioning here?
I think something related to jobs to be done, which is very important,
Hmm.
is figuring out ways to do customer research the right way.
Oh.
Because I think that we are, again, with the amount of information that's out there and with the knowledge sharing and so on, by now we're sort of aware that we need to focus on the customer. But how do you do that is actually just as important a question.
Hmm.
And there's one thing that I'm going to tie to that previous discussion
Hmm.
and talk shortly about, which is how do you phrase that conversation with the customer and how do you phrase your questions in a way that makes sense. And to that end, there's a pretty famous book in our researcher field. I'm pretty sure you probably know it already, called The Mom Test,
Hmm.
by Rob Fitzpatrick. It's really about that premise that no matter if you have never met that customer in person, or you have a long-standing relationship with them, when you come into a discussion with them and you ask them questions, they're going to try to please you. The same way that when you ask your mom, hey, like, did I do well here or not? She's always going to say, yeah, honey, you did a great job. Um, so this is, I'm not gonna get into the weeds of it, but essentially what we're trying to do with jobs to be done and any type of customer research, speaking more broadly, is that we need to ask people what they've done in the past and what behavior they've exhibited,
Hmm.
rather than just focus on what they tell you they think or they might do in the future. And this is sort of a great uh, it's more than a framework. It's sort of a researcher mindset, which is that everyone you talk to is going to lie to you, not because
Yeah.
they're bad people, but because they're trying to please you. We're social animals.
Hmm.
If we're not, if people don't like us, we're going to get eaten by a wolf. So
Hmm.
it's very important that people like us. And to ingratiate yourself to someone else, you're going to say, hey, yeah, this is awesome. This is amazing. It's very interesting. And there's no amount of saying, I really appreciate honest feedback and I won't get offended. We just do it on almost on a subconscious level. We
Hmm.
don't even know that we are lying when we do. Um, so this is a sort of very important one. And when it comes to messaging, I'm doing this challenge where I try to promote myself more when I have cool stuff to share. So on the messaging front, where I was talking about the key value pillars and all the different elements, I actually have a framework that I use for that,
Hmm.
which we can link to in the
Oh
comments. It
yes, absolutely.
just like simply called the messaging framework. It doesn't have like a fancy acronym to it
Okay.
or anything like that.
Speaking of jargon, none of it here. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's the tool I use to extract that information and structure that information for customers that I work with, and I've seen it, how it performs in real life, and it's battle tested, and I think that people might find it useful as well.
Oh, that totally. Yeah, any kind of frameworks, any tools, any charts, I always dig them, and I think people also. So, very happy to link that later in the description. Before we wrap up, can we just for a second look into the future, maybe a bit? I'm not gonna pretend that we know what future holds, but we definitely can imagine some kind of future. So, in terms of industry trends. Um, what sort of trends or maybe developments do you find most exciting or challenging right now and going forward?
Well, I don't think that anyone's gonna answer that question without mentioning AI in
Yes,
some
I knew
shape or
that. Okay,
form.
perfect,
So
perfect, perfect. Okay,
yeah,
go for it.
I'm not gonna be any different on that end. But the reason I'm excited about AI is that for years on end, I've been telling people, when you're doing marketing, you need to form that human connection. You need to start building relationships. You need to be empathetic with your customers, which are innately human
Hmm.
characteristics. And when it comes to the development of AI, I think it's gonna save us a lot of time. It's gonna produce a ton of crap, but what it's definitely going to do is it's gonna highlight our necessity to look for human connection and to build brands that are more human. And what I mean by that is we're already seeing that early signs of that because Google introduced expertise in their EAT framework. So they are when they're evaluating search results, one of the elements are, has this person actually done this before? Is
Hmm.
it sort of a research report based on all of the other results on the internet that this person has read and then regurgitated on a page?
Hmm.
Or is it talking about personal experience and it's sharing ideas based on what this person has done in the past? And that's a sort of an early signal. Another one is just the whole level of that arise of content creators who are people rather than brands. And the ones who do a good job are the people who are connecting with their audience and really trying to be on that same level, and using that jargon of the in crowd,
Hmm.
showing people that they know what their audience is going through, and so on and so forth. And then if you think about really any type of customer experience that you've had, there's probably a good human involved in it. It may be it may be a tourist guide on your last trip somewhere, or the waiter in a restaurant that just went above and beyond to serve you right. It may be a salesperson who helped you out with valuable recommendation. Whatever it is,
Hmm.
usually there's a human involved. Like, we are nowadays so overstimulated with different cool things to look at and to listen to. And on the customer side, there are so many high quality products that what they say, there's now a high floor when it comes to products, just what we're getting on an everyday basis. Like, even the crappiest smartphone you can buy is not gonna bail on you in a couple of hours. Like, it's
Right.
not gonna break, it's not gonna like completely lose your
Yeah.
information and so on. But then you will look beyond quality to that human element that really creates that meaning and builds a deeper level connection. And I'm very excited that I think being human is gonna be the new premium.
It could be. It might as well be. I've always thought that. I mean, look, you said it. We are social animals, absolutely, and it's always going to be human to human. It's just that AI will free us up to focus on that a bit more. It will
Yeah.
remove that noise. It will help us get to the point faster, and
Yeah.
I think that is a future I want to look forward to.
Yeah, definitely. And
Absolutely.
that's also the reason why we're hearing so much, and I've been focusing a lot over the last year on the topic of personal branding, because you need to present that human side to really get attention from people.
Yeah, there's talk about being like genuine online,
Yeah.
and I think it's fair point, right? Like you don't want to come across as someone who you are not. How long can you keep that facade up? Like it's not really
Yeah.
sustainable. So be genuine, be human, connect with people, and act like a human person, not AI. Don't post anything AI generated, and you'll be just fine. I think, especially on the personal brand level.
Yeah.
Um, is there anything else that you'd like to share with listeners before we wrap it up?
So I mentioned personal branding. I've been focusing a lot on that lately. Actually, I sort of put personal themes that I want to deep dive deeper into and focus on. And from last September or October up till now has been my year of focusing mostly on personal
Mm-hmm.
branding and creating content for the benefit of a personal brand. And I actually am currently launching a course on personal branding. I've actually been building a personal brand even before I knew it. I sort of did it on accident,
Wow.
almost at first, but that's a different story that we may dive into in different time.
Mm-hmm.
But essentially, I started creating content online, and then all of a sudden, I actually figured out that a lot of different opportunities were coming my way precisely because I was visible online and because I was trying to just create helpful content without no, thought or agenda behind it.
Mm-hmm.
And this was a great experience, but at the same time, I think it's gonna take you a lot less time if you're following more of a structured process to arrive at this point where I'm currently at. And to do that, I sort of created a course that takes you through the more structured approach to building your personal brand, from figuring out what your brand needs to be all about and who do you want to speak to, through figuring out differentiation and how to stand out. Because, there are probably 10,000 at least marketers out there who are just as good as me or even way better. But, being visible among them is going to be a hard task
Yeah.
unless you differentiate. And then, probably most importantly, finding the right approach, the right methodology to create content consistently without it taking you away from your day job, because you can't really work on your personal brand 24/7. You need
Mm-hmm.
to actually do client work and not do all the other exciting stuff. And the personal brand needs to be there to support you to do that rather than take you away from it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's called the Personal Branding Blueprint. We actually have a promo code for it for listeners here.
Yes, we
And
do. Yeah.
yeah,
Go for it.
yeah. So if you go to my website, which is going to be linked below, because Volchanova is not a
Mm-hmm.
family name that's easy to spell, and you find the personal branding blueprint. If you put in the discount code what's web, all one word without any apostrophes or anything like that, you're gonna get an additional discount, and the course will come to you for the low price of €99.
Thank you so much. That's awesome. To be honest, I'm all in. Could you just tell me if the curse itself is helpful to people who want to try solo consultancy line of work, or would it also be helpful for a person like me who's just a founder of a company but searches for their own voice online?
Yeah, so there are a couple of different audiences that I was thinking about when I started building this up.
Mm-hmm.
And the two main ones are exactly business owners or founders who want to use their personal brand to promote their company and their work.
Mm-hmm.
And then also to consultants and freelancers like myself, who are trying to get more attention out there and potentially attract clients, speaking opportunities, and all of that sort of stuff. And more broadly speaking, to I call them digital professionals as the broadest group, people who want to showcase their expertise online, no matter if this is for the purposes of connecting with peers, or maybe catching the eye of a prospective
Hmm.
employer to change jobs in the future and make a new career move, or if they're just upskilling or changing direction in their role, and the personal brand might support that. It's All of the content is available on demand, so you get the whole process and you can actually complete that within 4 weeks. That's how it's designed, so that you can start getting results quickly. And at the end of October, we're actually going to supplement that on demand content with a couple of live sessions. And I think that's going to be a
Whoa,
lot of fun to actually
awesome.
connect with people.
Oh, I feel included. Thank you. No, I can't wait to get my hand on it. Thank you so much. And I will definitely look at it and see how it can help me, because to be honest, I've been struggling for a long time on LinkedIn now. So I'm very much looking forward to it. Um, can you just sum up very quickly again? What's the link and what's the code, just for one final time?
Of course. So it's vochanova.me, my family name,
Hmm.
/ personal dash branding.
Hmm.
And the promo code is what's web, all letters in one
Perfect.
block, without apostrophes or
Okay.
anything
And
like that.
of course, we'll include everything in the description. Don't worry about it.
Yep.
Um, how people can reach out to you if they have any follow-up questions, or how can they find you, what you do, and just follow you around? Can you tell us?
Of course, the best way will probably be LinkedIn. I'm pretty active there, and that's
Cool.
where I'm building my personal brand. So, I'm there most days, at least most days of the week. If you search for my name, you'll never find another another person with the same name there. So I'm in luck. It's not gonna be difficult to find me.
Hmm.
And then the other place where you can find more about me is my website. I actually have a weekly newsletter that just went out before we started recording. So
Whoa.
yeah, and I try to have in it a couple of useful links from the marketing world. I actually say, and this is true, I've made the math. I've done the math, and I read about 180 articles per week that are related to marketing strategy, content marketing, brand messaging. And I
Wow.
take the 5 best ones that I found and send it your way,
Okay.
along with a short essay on a topic related to content marketing and brand messaging that you may find useful.
Did you say 180?
Yes. I
Okay.
have the stats from
That's a
my
commitment.
content reader to back that up. So yeah,
Okay, no, no, I totally believe you. It's just the fact that the volume of it, wow.
yeah.
No, that's awesome. So we're gonna link to your newsletter, to your profile, definitely. It was such a pleasure, Vassy. Really, really, thank you so much for reaching out to me to talk with us, and I very much look forward to talking with you again, and then following you around on LinkedIn and seeing how you get on with building your personal brand. I mean, I will definitely learn from you if you allow me. Then I will stick
Thanks,
around.
thanks. Of course, of course. It's sort of why I do it. It's my place to experiment and so on. And if some of your listeners are actually looking for someone to help them with positioning and messaging,
Hmm.
although I'm currently focusing on personal branding, most of my actual day job is related to brands, especially in the tech and B2B services segments. So if I can be useful in any shape or form, just ping me.
Absolutely, and we established in this episode how it's all under the same umbrella, so it only makes
Yeah,
sense that you do both.
yeah.
Excellent. Again, thank you so much for coming, and we look forward to seeing you again. Thank you.
Thank you too.
Thank you for listening to my conversation with Vassy. To support this podcast, please leave a follow and share it with a friend. I hope to see you next time.